I'm Lisa Anderson, host of Supply Chain Chats. And I'm thrilled to be here today with Cory Whitman, who's Vice Chair of Colliers. We're going to be talking a bit about what's going on in industrial real estate distribution, big box distribution particularly, and what's happening with technologies and other strategies and techniques going on in the supply chain. So thrilled to be here today. Cory, feel free to tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe kick us off with what you see going on in industrial real estate.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Lisa. I appreciate it. Always good to be part of your blog and your channel and everything else like that. So I appreciate you taking the time. Yep, Cory Whitman, Vice Chair over at Colliers. So I specialize in representing industrial operators, groups in the distribution, supply chain, logistics industries, specifically focused here in the Inland Empire in Southern California on the bigger box industrial real estate sector, which is in our world, 100,000 square foot warehouses up to million square foot facilities. So typically our industry focuses in the space in and around supply chain, distribution, the ports, technology, et cetera. And you kind of segued into it earlier. There's certainly a lot of changes and as technology evolves, a lot of disruptions in our world and in the efficiencies world and et cetera. So over the last few years, it's been interesting. We've seen a lot of changes on the tariff front. We've seen a lot of changes on the development front. We've seen a lot of changes on the technology front. So it's made for an interesting real estate industrial market here in Southern California and frankly, across the entire US. But overall, what we see here in the Inland Empire is a lot of movement when it comes to availability, when it comes to real estate decisions. We represent both private groups as well as Fortune 500 companies. So we see the whole gamut on how operators are looking at real estate today, how they're changing their real estate decisions for tomorrow. Yep. And frankly, on top of that, what developers of these industrial buildings are doing differently today to accommodate the future-proofing needs of occupiers in our world, in your world, in my world. The supply chain sector is ever changing because, as you know, and I'm sure many of your guests and viewers know, supply chain has not always been the most efficient animal out there. And right now, with billions of dollars in private equity and technology trying to transform that world, there's just a lot of opportunity. And while it's a long sales cycle, if you will, and how those disruptions actually get adopted and take place, we are starting to see them enter our market, not only on the true, call it, blue chip companies, the Fortune 500 companies, but that's dripping down into some small, more so mid to large cap companies as well. And there's certainly disruptors on how they make real estate decisions. So if there's anything specific that you'd like me to reference to, I can provide color on anything as it relates to industrial real estate.
Well, so when you say you're starting to see it come through, do you mean is technology or there could be a lot of things, like you said, tariffs, there's been a lot of changes. So what specifically were you referring to?
So it's two different topics. So tariffs, that's, front and center of everybody's mind right now, has been for the last 4 to 6 quarters. It's different today than it was 4 quarters ago, as you very well know. What we've seen, call it over the last trailing 12 to 18 months is Q1 and Q2 through Liberation Day was just a shock. Nobody knew, no operator, none of our clients. We were all scrambled to figure out what is this as we move forward? What does this new environment look like? And the tariffs were a shock. Obviously, that causes shock to a P&L, that causes shock to an end consumer, the whole picture. And the reality is, your clients, my clients, they can all move forward through that, but you have to understand what that number is, what that tariff number is. Right. Once they figure it out, they can put together a business plan and accommodate. But what we ran through Q1 and Q2, Q3 of last year was uncertainty. And what that does in a market, I'm sure just for your clients, when there's uncertainty, it's really hard. It's really hard to make a big real estate decision that involves several $1 million, tens of $1 million of CapEx, relocation, downtime, CapEx components, when you don't have full conviction on what your overall P&L and profit margins look like. And that's what disruption of tariffs does. a lot of operators do not know, could not determine what their P&L truly was going to look like. So what we get from that is a stagnant market. Nobody wants to
Well,
make
for sure,
decisions.
especially with tariffs in distribution, I can see that because I mean, one of the key decisions is the building and investment. So, that's going to have a direct impact. What I've been saying, I actually just published an article last night about tariffs. I updated an article because since the Supreme Court ruling changed things,
Mhm.
what I was seeing is that things were starting to level out. Like people gained an understanding of really where the tariffs were going. And a lot of the trade deal frameworks have been worked out, but the ones that weren't worked out, they could figure out, what
Sure.
they're really going to be. And I think that that's like, although it will take there'll be a little disruption now because as they put new tariffs in place, my understanding is they're expecting to get back to the same levels of tariffs by country in essence.
Yep.
Because it's like, but so anyway, so what are you seeing on your side though? Are
Yeah.
you
I mean,
see
you,
it pick up?
yeah, spot on. I mean, we saw it towards Q4 and leading into this Q1 up into these first 6 weeks of the 2026, stable ground, if you will. Operators could make decisions. They understood what the tariffs are. Yes, we're having a change in that right now. Is it 10%? Is it flatline 15%? That will get solved hopefully in the near term, which I would agree with your consensus that we will see and we feel it right now that there's stability in the market to make decisions moving forward. And now that we have
Good. I'm
stability,
glad
we
to
can
hear
invest
that
in
actually.
CapEx. These groups can invest in CapEx. They can make longer term decisions. It really is the sparker to ignite the actual operation moving forward into either a growth, consolidation, whatever business plan they have up front. They can make decisions because there's solid ground that they know they can operate on.
Okay, well, good. So it sounds like from a tariffs point of view, so we'll put that topic aside, but it sounds like, certainly there was massive disruption at first, and that was
Yep.
true with the ports as well, because they went from crazy high volumes to no volumes.
Yeah.
And then all in all, though, the year for the ports was actually a record-breaking
A
year.
record
So
year.
overall, they did well. But there was a lot of disruption in the meantime. But things have stabilized, and it sounds like even with the large companies and big box retailers, they're generally speaking, things have leveled out. They can start making business decisions again. Although there's
Yeah.
a small disruption here, it looks like they know where they're going, where they know where the tariffs are going to go. So it's largely okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree
Okay.
with that. And then on the technology front, what you were asking, yeah, so that is and will continue to be one of the major disruptors in all of industrial real estate moving forward, good, bad, or indifferent, depending on what side of the spectrum you're on. It's the free market working. It's the reality of like how do we get more efficient in our existing footprint because real estate has become more expensive. It is all common logical sense, but adoption and technology in the warehouse distribution supply chain industry is slow. And that's driven by a few factors. And the most noteworthy factor being just access to capital. In any cycle, we see the deployment of technology start with the Fortune 500 companies. It's the Amazons,
It's
the
true.
Targets, it's Wayfairs, it's the groups that have access to liquidity to be able to spend that major capex into their operation and then actually run and justify it on ROI.
Yeah.
It's just math and it just makes sense for these guys because they have access to that capital liquidity. Obviously, it's a slow drip to the smaller guy that operates a 150,000 square foot warehouse. It's a private operator, maybe has a line of credit, maybe he doesn't. Maybe she has some liquidity that she can pull from, maybe she doesn't. And there's where the adoption starts to stall out. So
Right.
over the last
And there's
few
higher
years,
interest rates still,
exactly right. Yeah, and the
and
cost of
so
capital. The cost of capital
yeah, I
is
mean they're
still
coming
pretty high.
down, but it's still high.
It's still high
So
relative to a 10-year line, your 10-year, call it average, if you will.
sure. For sure, unfortunately. So it sounds like you're starting to see some of these technology changes come through with the big, like you said, it has to start with the bigger companies, the big box retailers, because they're the ones who have the capital to invest. Is that what you're starting to see?
Yeah, very much so, and especially on the big brand retailers, the brands that you would recognize in your everyday life because of consumer products, without mentioning names, they are
Right.
all, I shouldn't say all, 70 to 80% of those companies who are out in the market for call it million square foot space and above Most of them have some form of automation investment going into that warehouse. Some of them are fully automating those warehouses. So that could be
Okay.
the tune of $50 million investment of capex, and in some cases up to $300-400 million of capex. So
That's
again, it
significant.
goes back to who has access to that line of capital, and it's the big giants of our retail world. But what it's doing is it's shifting the paradigm of how operators look at real estate. And what I mean by that, it's no longer, okay, what's the rent? What's the clear height? How many pallet positions can I get in this warehouse? Now it's generally one of the first questions is how much power? Because if I'm going to
Ah, yes.
invest $200 million of capex in robotics, automation, MHE into my building, I need to know that I have power today, or I will have power adequate enough to operate this fully automated facility.
Well,
So
that's a really good point, actually, because California is, and I know that you're talking about these trends, and they're going to take place across the country, which is great because our viewers and clients are across the country. But to some degree, like especially on this topic, the Southern California region is the start process because we have the largest port complex, and
yep.
these types of products are coming through here. So. Uh, are you starting to see that, I mean, you mentioned a few of them, but it's robotics, like automation systems. I guess there's like, I don't know, are they utilizing artificial intelligence? Like what types of systems
Yeah,
are they looking
so
at?
the automation for sure. I mean, that's a big topic right now across all what we say major port markets. New Jersey, Savannah, Southern California, Houston, et cetera. It's all these operators want to become more efficient, less redundant, if you will, as well, and have quality controls in place that just frankly achieve higher metrics than the human workforce
Yeah.
can. That's just
Yep.
robotics. We see, yes, we do see it. I would say it's not as prevalent because of the capital spend that's required for these automations and these robotics. But the conversation on the smaller users side, the groups that don't have access to the capital, they're now really thinking about it. And those conversations wouldn't happen with a 200,000 square foot operator
Right.
4 years ago, 5 years ago. And today, now it's like we bring our supply chain industry into it. We bring people like you into that conversation. And it's okay, what does this new operation look like if we can go to an automated model, or if we can implement some new form of MHE within our warehouse to be more efficient? So they may not be the full scale operators like what an Amazon does or what you see in the news of full robotics throughout the warehouse, but they're trying to find ways to implement maybe 10% of their warehouse to be automated, maybe it's
Yeah.
15%,
Yeah.
or through other systems that can be more efficient. And AI is a
Right.
massive topic, obviously, across all
Yeah.
industries right now. It is certainly being used in our space with the caveat of it's being used by the companies that have access to AI, where they can leverage SKU inventory, they can leverage ordering power. It's really not as prevalent for the group that operates a standard warehouse or like a standard
Right.
3PL, unless it's a major 3PL that uses full technology to run their global network, et
Right.
cetera.
Right.
But most,
Right.
whether you're in Southern California or whether you're in New Jersey or whether you're in Houston or Savannah, most of the operators and the occupancy in those markets are driven by either mom and pop or small private companies that aren't this full automation group yet.
Well, to your point, though, it sounds like as far as the types of automation, certainly, AI is being built into ERP systems, WMS systems,
Yep.
automation systems for warehouses. Like you said, I mean, there's a lot of things, AR, VR, there's like, robotics. So we
Mhm.
could go on and on. You can even set up a digital twin to like understand like what your warehouse would look like. So you can do a simulation and
Yep.
decide, how to do layout. So there's like a lot of opportunities. And I think what you're saying, tell me if this is right, but the larger companies, of course, again, are, more likely to be working with some of those, like, also the larger, more modern softwares, like I don't know, let's just say Oracle or SAP, because they stand
Mhm.
out as like, larger ERP systems are
Right.
generally speaking going to partner with these types of folks and build it into the software. So you don't necessarily, it's not like you're going out to buy a AI and, quote software. It's generally something else. It's built into the equipment, to the connections. There's different ways it's built in. or business analytics. To your point, they may have to
Right.
use the I don't know, one of the clouds, like the Amazon
Sure.
cloud or who knows what. But nevertheless, it sounds like you're saying that the larger companies are starting to continue to make more investments along these fronts. Like you
Mhm.
said, you could, I mean, with the kind of money you were talking about, you can obviously ramp it up over several years. And so, but you're starting to see the larger companies do that. Even the smaller companies are starting
Yep.
to make some investments, even if they might start with 10% or 20% of their warehouse. They're starting to move in that direction. And that's actually not a bad idea because, like, some of the smaller warehouses may have worked with some clients that have like an e-commerce
Yep.
capability that's 20% of their products, and I'm making this up, but in
Sure.
the pallet kind of storage is
Mhm.
80%. And so you can implement additional technologies in the 20%, and start there because that's really the harder, or the area for more optimization, if you will.
That's
So
exactly right.
those types of ideas.
That's exactly right. And that's what the call it the market is adopting right now. Again, it is not tried and true amongst majority of operators, but it is certainly becoming more discussed with every operator. And it doesn't
Right.
change their business necessarily day one, but it helps them make smarter decisions. And that's the reality of becoming more efficient in today's world and be able to generate higher margins on your P&L. And that's the conversation we go through with every single one of our clients. Whether it comes to Mary to be true or not, we at least touch that conversation and topic to understand, hey, can we squeeze more out of this footprint than we did yesterday?
Right. Yep. No, that makes good sense. And it's, in a way, I think it's encouraging. What I'm hearing is that, they're this is going to continue to ramp up over time.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you said, the smaller mid-sized companies are going to follow the larger ones. And, this is a general rule. Of course, there can be a small entrepreneurial innovative company that, like, I think there's going to be many opportunities for folks to speed by the competition, if you will. However, like you said, it's a business equation. You have to be able to have the capital and, the resources, et cetera. So, but there'll be a lot of opportunities uh, for companies to stand out.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly.
Well, so circling back to the topic you brought up earlier, because I think it is a conundrum, especially for California, but really for the whole US, and that is energy. So you're saying that now they're looking at warehouses where can you support operations, and that those requirements are, I know, at least in the manufacturing space and the distribution space that I'm working with, they're um, really increasing at a large pace because artificial intelligence requires a lot more energy. But are you seeing that same trend in these big box retailers as far as their needs go? And then that, of course, California has one of the highest prices, if not the highest price, for
Okay.
energy in the US. So that's quite the challenge. So anyway,
Yeah.
so I'll let you
Yeah, I
tell me what you
will.
see
So it's kind of a twofold answer. So on the larger operators, groups that are genuinely going out and looking for 800,000, 900,000, million square feet and above, literally the first question out of their mouth is not price, it's not labor, it's not clear height, building specs, it is power. Because those operators are going in there again to reiterate, they're going to invest significant multi-million dollars into their
there.
capex
Deal.
for that operation. And if they can't get the power, they can't run the operation. So, for example, we had one group where we looked at 4 different markets across the Western United States, and what led the entire search was power capacity. They don't care
Really?
what the cost of the real estate was because they know the cost of that real estate relative to this size of an operation and the revenues that would be generated from it is nominal. Only except for the fact that they have to have the power to be that efficient to make that real estate cost nominal through the operation of the actual automation of the facility.
So
So
even though we have a really high price for electricity, you're saying it makes sense to me. In this case, I mean, you have to start with, can you get there? Can you
yeah,
scale to meet customer needs? And then you come back to, like, what's that cost item versus other cost items, and what's, the relevance.
yeah, I mean, most of these operators they're very, very sophisticated groups. I mean, they're looking at rents, buildings, and real estate search is no longer just, hey, what's my rent and what are my operating expenses? They layer on everything. Yes, can we get the power? That's okay, good. We could be in this market. Second is okay, what is the rent, the operating expenses, my leasehold expenses over my tenure there? It's labor. What's my labor in this region? If I'm going to employ 500 people in this warehouse, what's my access to labor? What's my drayage cost? How much is it going to take me to get my containers from the Port of LA, Long Beach into my warehouse? What's going to cost to get my SKUs out to the end consumer or other domestic contributors, et cetera? All that goes into the full analytics of, hey, does this decision to be in this real estate location make sense? Part of that, going back, we're on full circle with this. Yes, we do look at, and our clients do look at, what is the cost of power in Southern California? Yes, it is significantly higher, if not the highest in the country, as you mentioned, but we've also got access to 25 million people. And
It's true, because the volume is here, and that's exactly. I mean, there's the consumers in if you have a product that is going to go to consumers, it's a significant difference. If you're going to be located in close proximity to, what if California was a country, it'd be the sixth largest country, I think it is, or something like that.
in the world.
Nevertheless, there's a lot of consumers here.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So while yes, cost of the power is certainly a line item on the analysis, it really depends on where the outbound is going for that to be a big factor.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, how are you finding power availability though? Because that is a problem in California, because there's a lot of brownouts. And I mean, actually I have some clients that are the smaller type clients in California that kept getting their power turned off. It's obviously a disaster if you're a distributor. So what are you finding from that point of view?
So again, this is going to be more of a Southern California specific comment that I'm giving here. But our grid is, for the most part, for all intents and purposes, almost tapped, and if not tapped in certain areas of Southern California. So you have the existing infrastructure, which is great. So Lisa, you want to go lease a building. We're going to go look at 500,000 square feet. And we're not looking at a build to suit. We're going to lease an existing building that has been occupied by one or two tenants. We can easily go in there and quantify power. We obviously look at the panel. We understand what the amp's coming in, the transformer, et cetera. I can tell you we got XYZ today. The hard part is on the new development. So anything that's been developed in Southern California, has that building been energized by the local provider, or a build to suit? What power is available? What remaining power is available on that grid? And that's the real bogey. And the first example is, okay, power's there. It's been performing on that power. We have the panel, easy to get. The third one I mentioned is, okay, we're starting from scratch. It's a blank slate. How do we really know we can get power to this site? SCE or the other providers may say, yeah, sure, we've got power in the grid, but okay, has it been tapped out? Are there any existing commitments that you've already given out that are going to tap out this power grid? So to answer your question, that is a really important topic for a lot of our clients and operators out there. And frankly, we engage dry utility consultants for that. We engage engineers that specialize in doing exactly that negotiate with the utility providers, that know exactly what the grid has today, any transformers or substations that they're going to put in, and then go in there and work on behalf of our clients to make sure that we are allocated and we are in line with a guarantee for allocation of power to that facility in the future.
I think you would have to. It's like you said, it's a serious matter if you're going to invest, the 50 million to on up, and that's just in the technologies, let alone the building. So you sure better have power, or nothing is going to matter.
There's a great example. So it just happened in our market. This is in the Inland Empire. I won't give names for confidentiality reasons, but there was a major company, you would all know the names, that was looking at leasing a building in our market. The reality, they had gone, and this was going to be a build to suit. So it's dirt right now, and they were going to build the building exactly to the spec that the operator needed. This was 6-9 months in the works of planning, negotiating, et cetera. And at the end of the day, when everything was about to be consummated, signed up, sign, seal, deliver, they found out that the power could not be delivered to the site as it was initially indicated. And they literally the operator tore up the lease, stopped all negotiations, basically pivoted, and is now focused on an alternative project here in Southern California. But that is a that project, had it been completed, would have been close to probably a $500 million transaction for the operator over the life hold, and without the ability to tap necessary power that they were going to need during their tenure in the building. So it is a significant topic that we are very much in front of these days for these bigger box requirements.
Well, that is really interesting. We've been bringing that up from the manufacturing side of things, as well as some of the energy policies and how they relate to the supply chain. So I think, you're just kind of contributing additional information that just talks to the importance. I think no longer in your supply chain can you be thinking about just what's in front of you. You have to be not only thinking, who's the strongest, or you're only as strong as your weakest link in your supply chain. And the weakest link could be energy.
Absolutely. Especially in certain markets like Southern California where the grid is tapped. I mean, that's just the reality. You have to future-proof your building and watch out for those links that you're talking about that could be catastrophic.
Wow. Well, that's actually very interesting, and it's also quite valuable for folks to be thinking ahead, because if it depends on your position in the supply chain, but if you're in a certain market where you can't get access to power, who your neighbors won't be. So you have to think about this, because like a lot of logistics systems comes in clusters. Yeah. And, and that's one of the reasons why Southern California has been as popular as it is, because we have the port complex, and they have some advantages structurally over other, other ports, because like they have like the ability to dock in really deep water, which means that you can have a larger ship. And everybody in logistics shipping for many years has been thinking bigger is better, because they just have these ships go, across the ocean, and you can fit more on them. However, there are always downsides to every upside, and it's just managing through them.
And that's why you are here.
That's right. That's right. So I guess as we wrap up here, as the time flies, are you seeing, are you seeing trends like, since the ports had a record year, I assume that in distribution, we had a record year as well, as far as at least throughput through the distribution centers. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing more or less interest in, new buildings, or people moving buildings, that type of thing?
Great question. So yes, we did have a record year through the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, and you would equate that to, okay, warehouses are getting filled up, supply must be diminishing. I think operators, whether it's 3PLs, both domestic and foreign operators, are becoming more efficient with their real estate. And so like when you look at the Inland Empire right now, we are sitting at about 7.1% vacancy. And that's the highest level that we've been at in over 8 years. So the reality is, even though we have a lot of product coming through the port, our operators and the tenants and the companies are finding ways to utilize the real estate more efficiently. So they're not leasing as many buildings. They are maybe consolidating, et cetera. So the market itself has, some significant product availability, and especially in certain size ranges. So the way our market typically works and operates is by size segment. So the 100 to 250,000 square foot market tends to operate simultaneously. Buildings in that size range tend to trend off of each other. 250 to 500 is the next, call it tranche, if you will. 500 to $1 million, and $1 million and above. So when you look at the holistic market, we certainly have more supply than what you consider a healthy market. Ideally, we want to be around 4.5%, 5% vacancy. That's kind of the equilibrium point where rents kind of, keep pace with inflation. There is some adjustment, but they're not peaking like they did in 2022, 2023, where they're going up 30% every year. It's more of a 3% clip each year at that 5% vacancy. So there's certain tranches, like there's opportunity, again, as you mentioned, like with every constraint, there's always opportunity. So when we look like at the 250 to 500 market in the Inland Empire East, there's over 20% vacancy right now, which we haven't seen those levels in 11 years.
Yeah, that's significant.
Vacancy, landlords really want a tenant's business. So that means
right. So you have an opportunity to
negotiate
move
some pretty favorable terms.
Yeah.
There's certain other markets that are tight, like the million square foot market is the tightest market in Southern California right now. It's
Oh,
still
really?
sub 4% vacancy, right around 4%. Rents are still growing in that market. There's not a lot of product out there that's available. And with Southern California, or California in general, with AB 98, which is basically
Yeah.
legislation that got passed in the last year that really puts a constraint on development. It limits where these warehouses can be built. And when you have that constraint, it limits supply that can come online. And really, when you're trying to build a million square foot building, it takes 40, 50 acres to do that. And as you have these constraints on land, there just becomes less optionality to find those 50-acre sites, which means you just can't produce. The market can't produce these million square foot sites, which is why you see that the big box, the true real big box arena really stabilized and actually performing quite opposite of most other markets where rents are appreciating instead of compressing. So
That makes sense.
I could go an entire dissertation on where the market is, but I want to bore your viewers. But there's certainly in most port markets, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of shift as your clients and viewers look at real estate. The biggest encouragement I give everyone right now is really get out in front of it. Do not wait to the last minute. Typically, we like to engage, even for a 100,000 square foot warehouse, we try to engage and get an understanding of what the business plan looks like 12 months prior to lease expiration. And as you go up in size, as you know, you need more time. If you can get in
It's a
front
really
of it,
good point.
you can create leverage in a market that really sets you up financially well in a building, operationally, maybe even most importantly, flexibility in your lease over the next 3, 5, 10 years. So really one of those unique opportunities in the cycle right now where tenants have leverage. They haven't had leverage in quite some time, but they really have it now, specifically in our market, where if you get out in front, you can really create a business asset through your lease as you look into the future operations.
I mean, that's a really good point. So, pre-planning always goes a long way to be more successful, but it sounds like it's a particular area of opportunity right now. So I love that we can leave them with several thoughts really of ways to strategize to ensure that you can meet customer needs and do so in the most efficient way and with the least amount of cost. So, which is of course the end game.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Very good. Well, yeah, no, actually, I do have one last question just because I'm curious about this. But, the indirect source rule, which is a Southern California thing. So the indirect source rule, I know went in place. Are you seeing impacts from that? Which in essence means that they have to put in more, equipment or items to reduce emissions because they're in essence getting charged for the trucks. Emissions that are coming to visit them, if you will. So have you seen any,
we saw in 2021, maybe 2022, we saw a big influx of the push for electrified vehicle fleets and even on the big rigs. Again, cost of capital, it was primarily the larger institutional groups, operators that tried to electrify their fleet. And some companies did so. When you're going from the development side, when you look at entitling land for a building and developing a building, all the municipalities are certainly adopting an influx of requirements on clean energy, electrification of vehicles, minimizing exhaust, et cetera. And then as all that pulls over from AQM&D as well, when you look at drive aisles, you look at queuing lanes, you look at anywhere where a vehicle, a tractor trailer could be stationary. There are certainly influences on how those buildings are designed today. And then beyond that on the occupier, a lot of companies, larger companies specifically, are looking at, how do we reduce that footprint, that emission footprint, et cetera? How do we become more sustainable, et cetera? But with that, it's extremely expensive to convert a fleet over to electric overnight. So I even think that I think legislation passed that it actually pushed out, or they amended some of this legislation to kick out the dates on when some of the operators had to electrify the percentage of their fleet. So yes, we do see it, but it is certainly cost prohibitive for some of the smaller operators, and adoption has been slow.
That's interesting. That's in essence what I was thinking, but I wasn't sure on the the larger size companies if they were actually. It sounds like they're They adopted early on, but they are having a hard time, showing the payback, if you will. So
Exactly
there's
right.
like you could pay the fines instead, or I don't know. There's other options. Unfortunately, it's not the best. It's not the ideal rule for them. That's to
Exactly
be
right.
sure.
When a truck costs 3 to 4 times as much as a typical diesel operator, and finding the infrastructure to charge that fleet and the cost to charge that fleet, all of a sudden, like, it's a good concept in theory, but practicality wise to a P&L, it really takes a high balance sheet operator to be able to justify that kind of conversion.
Yeah, and then you even need the energy to like make sure you can run it all.
Exactly.
To your point earlier. So yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. It's been really valuable. It was really interesting to hear what's trending and to confirm some of my assumptions. So anyway, it's been great talking with you, Cory, and I appreciate you joining us.
Always a pleasure, Lisa. Thanks for having me on. We'll look forward to do this again.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.